right, welcome everyone to the latest of our Flash LinkedIn 15-minute deep dives. I'm Abhinav Kapoor, co-founder, CEO of Bicky. We are a customer data platform for restaurants, and joining me today is Scott Landers from Figure Eight. Scott, how you doing?
Hey, Abhinav, good to see you. How are you?
You as well. Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
If you want, go ahead, please.
no, just it's good to be here. It's a nice, cool day here in Oklahoma.
Excellent. Now, just to set a bit of context, could you just quickly introduce yourself and Figure Eight and what y'all do?
Sure thing. So my name is Scott Landers. I'm the co-founder and CEO over here at Figure Eight, and you can think of us as your chief digital officer. We operate on a fractional basis for emerging and enterprise restaurants, call it 50 to 500 locations, really spanning marketing and IT to make sure that your e-commerce and digital channels are performing at peak service.
Excellent. All right. So you already kind of hit the hot button issue here. What is a chief digital officer?
Yeah, what is a chief digital officer? So we're an agency. So really, it's a people role, obviously, as any other C-suite officer. And what the rise of the chief digital officer tracks is really the rise of e-commerce and digital ordering in restaurants. We've seen that go from pre-pandemic of like 5% orders to some restaurants now have more than half their orders coming through digital channels. And what I mean by that are online ordering, pickup, delivery, catering, kiosk, text message ordering, all these new channels that have opened up that are not somebody walking into your restaurant. And really, the chief digital officer spans marketing on one side and IT on the other to make sure that that e-commerce bridge and that conversion funnel is really effective and working 24/7, 365.
Yeah. Can you talk about what that bridge is? I know in our prep call yesterday, we touched on this a little bit, but you had a really nice framing of sort of like in the old days, the guest did all the work, and today the guest doesn't do any of the work, and how that correlates to this e-commerce or digital bridge that you're talking about. Could you walk us through those ideas of guests doing work versus guests not doing work, and sort of how the need for a better digital stack has emerged as a result?
That's right. So in a pre-digital world, right, you had marketing and IT, and they could largely operate independently. They each were responsible for their own budgets, their own teams. Marketing was responsible for branding and campaigns and exciting reasons to get the guest to walk in the door. And IT kept the lights on. They made sure that the Wi-Fi was good, the firewalls were set up, the point of sale was online, and then the guest did all the work. They walked into your restaurant, they gave you cash or a credit card, and that was the transaction. Now, in a digital world, those two marketing and technology have really collided, right? And they think very differently about how to run a business. And the reason is because in e-commerce, that marketing campaign, let's say it's an advertisement on a third-party marketplace, right, has to make it all the way through the menu, right, and the actual order online, be aggregated across all the marketplaces you are on to get dropped into your point of sale and then dispatched and delivered out to the guest ultimately. And so if you don't have really tight communication on a human level, really tight integration between, again, your website and your marketing all the way down to that digital point of sale, if you will, things start to break, right? For any digital order to go right, you've got to basically have 1,000 things go right. And if any one of them breaks, the guest has a bad experience. And we know that guest recovery and getting somebody to come back is the hardest thing.
Yeah. And I guess that begs the next question, which is like, okay, that's like totally understand this. I think we're everybody at this point is well aware of this transition that's been happening from, let's call it like non-digital to increasingly digital, and that shift is happening increasingly. Why do you need a specialized person that sits between marketing and sits between IT and sort of handles that coordination? I guess said another way, why can't a traditional marketing leader or a traditional IT leader who has maybe been with the brand through that transition, why can't they take on the mantle of also becoming a chief digital officer, or at least owning the digital part of the business?
Yeah, and I think we see people kind of attempt to do that in various ways. And if you're naturally good at this, it's possible, right? But what I see more often than not is you have a director of IT, right? And their whole career, from school, they're coming up in a restaurant, their training is, again, keeping the Wi-Fi on, keeping the firewalls on, dealing with the credit card processors and the hardware and the routing and all these things that have nothing to do with optimizing a DoorDash algorithm, for example, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, with your marketing, right, they're very creative, right? They are focused on branding and campaign and understanding customer psychographics and the positioning in the market. Again, not thinking about, oh, if I run this LTO and I want to launch it tomorrow, that menu change has to ripple across 7 different pieces of technology,
Right.
from the marketplace, the aggregator, the point of sale, the loyalty provider, the back end inventory, right? Like you can't just
Yeah.
launch a sprinkle cookie and flip it on the point of sale and good. It has to ripple across so many different pieces of technology. And so the chief digital officer, there's really 2 components of that. Operating at the chief level really means that you're looking at it from the highest point of view for really quality decision making.
Mm.
And digital being this holistic approach that encompasses both marketing and IT for
Mm.
those channels. So it really makes sure that there's somebody in the room that, we often get referred to by our clients as air traffic control, right?
Right.
Which we're making sure that IT can do what they do really great and marketing can do what they do really great. And then we coordinate to ensure that both the kind of, again, the human level and the technology level are ultimately delivering on that promise.
Yeah. I think this is the way I've been thinking about it as you were speaking was like, okay, this is essentially just a net new muscle. Like e-commerce is still very new for brands,
Yes.
even though it is 30%, like off premise, digital off premise can be 30% of the business now. Actually optimizing that channel is still a very nascent net new muscle that brands still have to build, right? Because it's almost like you had the pandemic happen. There was this massive shift to digital ordering, whether it's first party or third party. The business becomes 100% digital overnight. And people lag the technology, or people who operate in the restaurant necessarily lag the massive shift that happened in guest behavior. And now that we're through the scramble of sort of the post pandemic era, we're through that mad dash to actually get online with these channels. We're into sort of inning 3, let's call it, of like, how do we optimize? How do we scale? How do we clean the foundation? It's just a whole set of different capabilities that restaurant IT leaders and marketing leaders haven't necessarily had to, like skills that they necessarily haven't had to develop previously. Is that sort of like a fair way to think about
For
it?
sure. Yeah. And I think it happened so quickly, right? That to your
Right.
point, we're just focused on keeping the lights on and staying
Exactly.
head above water. And
Yeah.
now that we've normalized it, it's like, okay, well, we're not going back to the old days, right? The same
Right.
way that when credit cards came around, I'm sure a lot of restaurants like didn't want to see credit cards, and now credit cards are like 98% of all transactions, right?
Right.
Digital is, maybe it won't get to 98, but I've seen brands like Firehouse Subs say like we're going to be 100% digital by
Right.
2025, right?
Right.
So it's starting to go there, and I speak with many brands who are already north of 50%.
Yeah.
So building that, to your point, that muscle and having that experience, I think that's one of the things that I bring to the table, and that I've been doing digital basically for 8 years straight now, which seems like forever
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
industry. And
Yeah.
there's
You and me both. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, right. You and me both. Then there's a few people that have been able to build that muscle and build that experience and understand really the nuances of how these platforms
Right.
interact, right? And one of the beautiful things that I've been able to do is see that across dozens and dozens of brands, right? So many people, they come up in one brand, they only see it from one point of view. So being able to really have that total 360 on how digital has evolved over the last few years, what it's like to really, I love technology vendors, but you can't always take it at face value, right? Everybody has an agenda. And so as the digital officer, I have to coordinate across 7 different pieces of
Hmm.
technology and make sure that they work in harmony. So it really is just building that experience, that skill set, because this is increasingly the way that our customers are saying they want to order.
Yeah. And if we sort of drill down into that a little bit, and if you had to call out, just given the breadth of brands that you've worked with or speaking to, maybe call out the 2 to 3 things that you feel like the best brands are doing. And by that, I don't necessarily mean it could be growing the digital share of the business. It could also mean just executing the best from a digital experience standpoint. What are the 2 to 3 things that come to mind when you think of, oh, we work with them and they were clearly the best in terms of how they thought about optimizing or scaling or leveraging their digital stack and the digital experience?
Yeah. So at Figure Eight, everything we do comes down to people and process, right? I'm an engineer by training, so I love process. But as we know, these are mostly human problems that require human solutions and
Yeah.
getting the people on the same board. So when I think about the best brands, they have great people, right? So they have a digital team, right? And if you're north of 1,000 locations, you can afford to have a full-time chief digital
For sure.
officer and a whole digital team and dedicate those resources to optimizing every little aspect of this platform. They also have really great process. And what I keep coming back to and learning every year more and more is that less is more when it comes to digital, right? Having that really tight, call it 12 item menu with very limited modifiers because you're focused on combos and single items. It pays a nonlinear response, right? It's an exponential dividend that it pays by keeping things really simple, because the technology has not fully integrated itself in a way that is trustworthy. I mean, we were working with a client this week, and they were changing their seasonal menu, and there was like some weird nested modifier that we changed in Toast, and it made it to Olo, but it broke by the time it got to Uber.
Wow.
And the diagnostic reports aren't always clear. They don't tell you exactly where the issue is. It's like you really have to like dig deep. And so having really clean processes, having a really simple menu, and then having a dedicated team that's focused on executing it. So again, marketing can come up with the greatest LTOs, and IT can keep the firewalls on, and that digital team can make sure that the experience is ultimately delivered to the guest in a really high quality way.
Yeah, I love that. It's so interesting as you were talking about like a tight menu and less is more. The way I kind of think about at a very high level, this transition is like drive-through started 80 years ago, and it changed the real estate strategy, the customer experience, the packaging, the menu, the staffing model, and you're sort of having that same thing happen today with the rise of digital transactions and digital channels. And when you were talking about what the best brands do, we did a very similar LinkedIn Live with Jared Cohen, COO of Protein Barn Kitchen, and he was talking about exactly what you said. People can't do unlimited modifiers. You can only choose one modifier, right? And the menu, we scale that back so that it's our most profitable items because of the margin impact. And also, they're the things that also deliver the best and ensure the best guest experience. So it's like this mix of merchandising that, again, is a different muscle to flex outside of traditional brand marketing or traditional IT, that I think can empower brands to be successful when they sort of scale their digital efforts.
Yeah, and I love that you say that, because like drive-through is such a great analog to what's going on. I always try to make it physical with people, which is, imagine a print menu, right? So something like this, little moleskin I have here, extra business cards, and then now look at this, right? By contrast, right? One, you have tons of less real estate.
Right.
The way that I look at this is I can see it all at once. I can see all the categories, and there are a whole like specialized people that are trained in like where to put the underline and the bold and how to organize the categories. Whereas here, like I'm scrolling through, and it's a totally different interaction for the guest. It's a totally different way to think about how you present that offering ultimately to them.
Right. And psychologically, if you have a large menu and you're scrolling through, the guest is more likely to get, I mean, think about it. When you're scrolling Twitter, Instagram, like you just get fatigued. At least I do. I get fatigued very quickly when I'm scrolling through Twitter, to the point where I actually just try to refresh my Twitter feed because I don't want to keep scrolling down to catch things. I'm just like, if I missed it, I missed it. And so it's interesting to that point where it's like you're optimizing for just less real estate, essentially. Yeah.
That's right.
I love that. And okay, so where do you feel like, though, internally from an organizational standpoint, where are you seeing the most push happen to have better digital people and processes internally? Is that coming from marketing? Is that coming from IT? Is that coming from somewhere else? Maybe walk us through, where the pull that you're seeing is coming from.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we kind of equally get pulled in from both directions. Sometimes I'm kind of, in my role at Figure 8, I'm reporting up through the marketing division of the restaurant. Other times I'm reporting up through the technology division. And other times I'm just going
finance.
straight to
I was gonna say, it's like, do you ever get pulled from like, what's that? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, otherwise I'm working directly with the C-suite, which is primarily either a chief development officer or a chief financial officer.
Yeah. And I think it's, all the things we're talking about are like that nested modifier issue that you called out, like has real financial implications. If Uber Eats is down there's a reaction. If Uber Eats is down at the time that you are trying to launch this critical menu initiative that is, finance is collaborating on it, marketing, tech, everybody's collaborating on it, and it causes the whole channel to crash, that's a huge financial issue with real financial implications. So that's why I'm curious, where it's like, I feel like marketing and tech can be in their own traditional silos. And so does it require somebody else to come in and push for you to come into the organization? But
yeah, usually it's the C-suite that's bringing us in because they're looking across like marketing and tech, and they're seeing that they're broken or seeing a gap in the organization, and don't necessarily see that internal talent to fill it, or recognize that we need somebody who actually is a specialist in e-commerce.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We're a little bit over here, but I have one final question before we leave it for the folks watching this. What is your forecast for growth of digital orders? Like where do digital transactions as a percentage of the overall business go in 2025? That's one question. And then the second question is, do you think that we as an industry will ever be a truly 100% digital business?
Oh, that's great. I mean, 2025, I mean, up for sure. I know it's like a simple answer, because I think the rate is really the question, right? You look at credit cards as a proxy. I'm sure in the 70s, people would have been like, no one's ever going to use this piece of plastic for all of their transactions. And now, like, people don't clear cash, right? And that took 20, 30 years.
30 years, yeah.
Because I think there's a generational shift as well, which is, Gen Z and younger, citizens who are less than 25. This is their whole world, right? Like if it doesn't live here, it doesn't exist. Yeah. So I think similarly, it'll take time for that to age out demographically. But yeah, I believe that if you look at retail as a proxy, they're probably 20 years ahead of restaurants. And we had the pandemic that accelerated things. So I don't know, over the next 15 years, 10 years, I'd say we're going to be vast majority of the industry.
Majority digital.
Digital, for sure.
Majority digital. Okay. All right. Excellent. We'll leave it there. Scott, thanks so much. We probably could have gone another half hour at least, but appreciate you being here. For those of you who are watching this on the stream or the recording, thanks so much for being here. Hope you got something out of it. And yeah, thanks so much. Take care, Scott.
Thanks, Abhinav.
Be well.